Welcome to Dig on America, where we speak truth to power.
So today we're going to do a dig as Haas gets up and wanders away.
He about to do what I'm about to do. Let me go get something to eat while you do this whole thing. Go ahead. We're listening. We can hear you.
All right, let's get to this. So this is there's a reason why I picked this particular topic. I have been doing a lot of Twitter Spaces lately, and it seems to me that there is always misinformation regarding COVID vaccines, etc., that is flying around online. And I kind of want to educate people on something that I didn't even really know too much about until probably like a month or two ago. And I think it makes a lot of sense to do a dig on it. So it's not really a history topic, but it kind of is more of a modern history type of thing. So let's get into it. So now, my 8th grade social studies teacher, Mr. Humble, taught me things that turns out, after doing my own research, which is exactly what this dig is about, wasn't exactly the whole stories. And this week we will dive into the topic of green open access research as related to COVID-19. So in academic publishing, an e-print is a digital version of a research document, usually a journal article, a thesis, a scientific study, or a book that is accessible online through a process called self-archiving. Self-archiving is when an author deposits a free copy of an electronic document online in order to provide open access to it. This is usually done with peer-reviewed material for the purpose of maximizing its accessibility, usage, and citation impact, and to give the opportunity for further peer review, which is often done with the goal of disproving the conclusion of the study. The term green open access has become the most common way to describe these self-archived documents in recent years, distinguishing this approach from gold open access, where the journal itself makes the articles publicly available without charge. Now, this differs from digital libraries such as JSTOR, which many of us are familiar with from our college days. Sites like JSTOR contain digitized back issues of academic journals, which, of course, we would go to find articles we never read to use as citations in our highly plagiarized research papers. Probably one of Joe Biden's favorite websites. I don't know, just spitballing there. When applied to journal articles, the term e-prints covers both preprints, which means before peer review, and postprints, which means after peer review. So MedRXiv is one such open access print repository distributing unpublished e-prints about health sciences. It was founded by that mischievous Spider-Man villain of the same name.
Dr. Oculus?
Or Superman villain of the same name, I should say. I have Spider-Man on the shirt, Superman on the brain. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. That's Mixoplex. But it's just so close that I can't let the dad joke slide by. So the site was actually founded in 2019 by two men named John Inglis and Richard Seaver of Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, as well as by Theodora Bloom and Claire Rawlson of BMJ Medical Publishing, not to be confused with BJ.
Which is a Patreon-only show of Jenna and Brenna.
Yes, exactly. And those two are from Yale University. So MedRXiv is actually not how it's enunciated. It's spelled MEDRXIV, which is why I've been calling it that. But that's actually not how it's pronounced officially. As it's the much more boring MedRxiv is how that word is pronounced. It distributes complete but unpublished manuscripts in the area of medicine, clinical research, and related health sciences without charge to the reader. Such manuscripts have yet to undergo peer review, and the site notes very clearly that the content is of preliminary status and that the manuscripts should not be considered for clinical application, nor relied upon for news reporting as established information. Medical photographs cannot be included since the editorial team does not have the resources of a journal to do thorough checks of patient consent. So MedRXiv and its sister site BioRXiv, which of course none of those, I've already told you that that's not how it's pronounced. BioRXiv, which is unfortunately also not a comic book villain and is also pronounced as BioRXiv, do perform some basic screening and checks for plagiarism. So President Biden, watch out before you steal info from there. Now, prior to the establishment of these sites where this medical information is shared, scientists were divided on the issue of green open access. Many had concerns of having their research scooped or stolen away by competitors and losing their claim to discovery. It has been measured that 2/3 of the papers posted online to these green open access sites are later published in peer-reviewed journals. Recently, the companies have used Twitter to detect trending of their preprints on that social media platform to see which ones are most popular. Now, both of these sites have been major sources for dissemination of research on COVID-19. And that, my friends, is where things get into the weeds. Now, in the early days of the pandemic, these sites gained new notoriety. BioRXiv and MedRXiv, I'm going to call them that because it's more fun, hosted 25% of all COVID-related research published during the year 2020, which again would have been like March until the end of the year, so about 10 months. There was more than 10,000 papers uploaded to these sort of repositories. In contrast, only 78 preprint papers were uploaded during the entire Zika epidemic. Now, COVID proved to scientists and the medical community that preprint servers are a crucial resource in this crisis. At the same time, though, experts said that the pandemic also made the shortcomings of scientific publishing clear. However, this leads to the question of how the media and public use this information once it is released. I get the vision of Indiana Jones and opening up the Ark, faces melting off of, which is, of course, I'm sure there's a preprint paper somewhere claiming that is exactly what Pfizer is doing to all of us. But anyway, websites that post scientific research before peer review have been active for decades, mainly used by physicists such as Mikey. Likewise, scientists have always shared drafts of their research among their peers. Those lines of communications exist parallel to the traditional process of peer review, which puts gatekeepers between the research and the publication of the research. First, the paper has to be accepted by the editors of a scientific journal. Then it goes to a panel of scientists for critique. This is followed by edits and more experiments before eventual publication. This process does not happen quickly. On average, it takes about 6 months for research to go from acceptance to publication. So now, the issue of speed was particularly important for clinical research during the pandemic because doctors needed to up-to-date information to make life-saving decisions. For example, preprints showing that the steroid dexamethasone could reduce the likelihood of death in COVID patients was originally posted as a preprint. It made the New England Journal of Medicine 8 months later, but the preprint coming out before that made it possible to get that knowledge into doctors' hands faster and absolutely save lives. So let's be clear. Green access to preprints are generally a very good thing, but they have a dark side as well. And that's where we'll close with. For example, the paranoia about COVID being spread by 5G started, guess where? As a preprint, and had to be later retracted by a journal that actually picked it up. The real trouble with these preprint papers is how those studies are promoted on social media and the press. This is a quote. Prior to the pandemic, I had few concerns about poor quality science being widely spread, according to a Harvard professor. But now everyday people are reading them at an increasing rate. This means that when bad science is pre-printed and happens to be sensational enough to get traction, it can quickly shape the discourse around any given topic. One of the top tweeted preprints of the pandemic was a study that estimated what share of the population in Santa Clara, California was infected with COVID. The results of this study found that a far higher rate of infection than anybody had previously calculated. And this was used against the death rate to support the idea that COVID would cause few deaths and that no lockdowns would be necessary. Of course, it was later revealed that the research had been funded by an airline magnate who was critical of social restrictions.
I need them planes in the air.
I need them planes in the air. So in closing, the pandemic has made clear that the information in a preprint on these sites, it slips out of the scientist's control the moment it is posted online. So if you put something in public, it is fair game for the public and can become ammo for conspiracy theorists. So with that being said, I think that should generate a little bit of debate. So what are your guys' thoughts as far as these preprint sites? Obviously, they do a lot of good. They get good information to doctors early, but they also spawn a lot of misinformation and conspiracy theories because nothing's been tested. Mikey, I'd like to get your thoughts first.
Well, it's kind of that there's a bit of a double-edged sword to it because it's just like the internet. Like the internet can be used for amazing goodness, and you can find out things, you can order things, learn a lot of shit just through your phone or through your laptop. But there's also that toxic side of it. There's also the bad side of it. Unfortunately, in this country, critical thinking is not taught to people at a young age and is not bolstered throughout their young adulthood and into their further adult years. Americans are shitty fucking like problem solvers. They're very bad. Like we're awful. It's embarrassing on a lot of levels. Simply because if you sit down and think about a problem before you act, then you usually come out with a better result than, well, I saw it on Facebook, so it must be true. Like seeing it on Facebook means, all right, well, let me spend, I don't know, 5 minutes. I'll spend 5 minutes to see if I can verify or falsify this thing. That is not in the lexicon of the average Facebook user. They just say they read the half of the big long post, they read the meme, and then they share it. And that's all that's important to them is that they yeah, that's totally right. Yep, that makes sense to me, and then they just share it. And the intellectual laziness of this country is the reason why these papers are even a problem in the first place. If people actually looked into what those papers are and what they mean when they come out, it would be a different thing. Like I don't know. To you, Big Haas.
Well, I was just gonna say, it's a preprint, right? That's what they call it.
Mm.
What is pre short for? Preliminary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Preliminary, at its essence, means untested, unproven. Preliminary findings. How many times have we heard that in crime? Preliminary findings suggest that it was a murder, but upon the coroner and doing the autopsy and everything, it comes to find out that nope, it was a suicide. They didn't get murdered. They actually, or preliminary indications,
or vice versa. They thought
yes,
it was a suicide. Yeah,
right, exactly. And I think that if, like you said, people use critical thinking skills and say, okay, this is a preprint, meaning these are preliminary findings that haven't been tested and gone through challenge yet, by medical experts or by whatever. You could do a preprint for about anything, using peanut oil to power an engine, preliminary findings suggest that there is a way to do that, but we're gonna look into it more, and then we'll publish an actual paper, a white paper, I think they call it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But people don't think that deeply, because if the preprint fits their ideology, they run in with it. Instead of saying, okay, this is a preprint. It sounds good, but something, I'm gonna wait until some solid stuff comes out after the testing is done. It's like people have forgotten high school and the scientific method, and just people who barely pass chemistry and biology are saying question the science that is being curated by virologists, immunologists, and epidemiologists with decades of experience. Well, I got my MD from Google University, and these things fit my ideology, so I'm questioning your science, even though you've gone through the scientific method. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of times on how many hundreds of thousands of things, and you probably answered questions that I haven't even thought of yet, and asked more questions based on the answers that you got from the questions you initially asked before you put this out. And it's one of the most frustrating things I've ever seen is, people who couldn't pass phys ed trying to say you got to question the science. You got to question these people. Based on what, man? If you've never rebuilt a transmission, you really gonna tell a mechanic, "Oh, I don't think that's the way." I'm gonna question your methods on this. Because
How do you know that's gonna work? I saw on YouTube that you're supposed to do it this way.
I saw on YouTube the dude put the gasket outside the damn thing instead of inside, like every manual says to do.
No,
everybody stayed in the fucking Holiday Inn Express when it comes to fitting their ideology on certain things. And my thing is this, and what goes hand in hand with that is the absolute refusal to have the emotional maturity to say, when facts are presented that refute their worldview, maybe I need to change my view of the world in this aspect, or maybe I need to change my view on this subject, because these facts fly directly in the face of what has been shown to be fact through statistic studies and other expert review.
Yeah, and like there's so I'll give you guys an example of this, because there's a paper going around right now that's getting a lot of really most of the attention from the right, and it's a study out of Israel. Now Israel has about 95% vaccination. So the study is a real medical study, and it was used. I read through the whole thing, and it was. I looked up a couple of scientific opinions on it, and it's real science. So what they did is they used observational data, which is a completely legitimate way to do research, and they compared COVID rates in vaccinated people compared to COVID rates in people who had previously had COVID, and then looked at the symptoms and the death rates and everything like that. And it found that this particular study found that there was about 13 times more antibodies within somebody who had COVID before compared to someone who had the vaccine. So there's two caveats with this. One is, again, this is a preprint. This has to be duplicated over and over and over again before you can call it science. Otherwise, for now, it's just a study. Does that mean it's wrong? It actually doesn't mean it's wrong. I've been very vocal in saying that I believe that somebody who has had COVID should get credit for, waiting to take the vaccine or something of that nature, because they have those antibodies in their system. I don't think you should need a vaccine pass if you just had COVID 3 weeks ago. All right, that's my opinion on that. I'm not going to.
And 3 weeks ago and 8 months ago are two different things, and I think that people have to understand that.
Yeah, I'm not even trying to go down the rabbit hole on that. This is a different conversation. But the point that you'll see on the right is they will post, Israel says vaccine ineffective. Here's the study. No one's going to read it, and those who are going to, because what they'll do is they'll screenshot like a tiny little bit of it, put it in yellow highlight, and then stick a picture up there. So now there are people who are actively using this study to say, I'm not going to take the vaccine because it's better to, because it shows here that you don't get as good of antibodies from the vaccine. But it's not, the study itself didn't compare people It didn't even mention people who were never infected with COVID or had no COVID antibodies. Yet they're using it as a complete blanket excuse to say, I'm not going to use the vaccine because this study in Israel says that the vaccine is not effective. It says it may not be as effective as someone who has recently had COVID. In addition, people who have COVID, people who have the vaccine in Israel are allowed to go unmasked. People who are not vaccinated, at least those who follow the rules, must wear masks. So why are you seeing higher COVID infection possibly in people who are vaccinated? It could be because the unvaccinated people are masked.
There you go, introducing context into the situation.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
The study literally says this. It literally says that. It says we have not studied the masked versus unmasked portion of this. We did not take it into account in our research. And
that doesn't matter.
Right. But these guys will say masks don't work. Well, the study right here directly says that it might be a factor. The article you're sharing a screenshot of. Okay.
I love when they do that.
And
the
that's
refutation of the refutation of your position is right there in the article you shared.
It's almost always there because the site has a big disclaimer on it, right? It says right there, none of this shit should be used to diagnose anything. It's still super important, right? Like if Mikey discovers the cure for, shingles tomorrow, he can post that on there and get peer reviewed way quicker than he can through traditional means. But it's and so it's a great thing. It's good for access to information. But when you take it and you say, okay, it might be an outlier because there's 73 other studies that say this, but I'm going to post this outlier as being the one that's telling the truth. Right. That is dangerous.
And you know something, people get upset at me when I say the examples of a few do not disprove the results of the aggregate.
Yes, and this is? They're posting. It's like Candace Owens. They're taking the 1%.
Thought we were gonna have one show without her fucking being brought up.
They're taking her, the Hodge twins, right? They're taking the I don't know how to say 1%, but the 6-7% of blacks who support Trump, and then saying everybody should because this guy does.
Right, because Herschel Walker dumbass does. Hey, guess what?
That's exactly correct. I do like sugarless gum.
Herschel got CTE or something.
I think he's going to win that race, huh?
He might. He's black. Ain't nothing white folks like more than a black dude that's gonna say what they want him to say.
Yep. Anyway, Mikey,
that's why I love Candace.
On these papers, and you're a scientifically minded guy.
I am a nerd.
How do you disseminate this information when you look at it?
Luckily for me, I'm in a very privileged position because I know actual people in the medical field. I know several doctors. I know several nurses. I can ask them. I can send them the link that I saw and say, hey, what is this? They're like, oh, no, that's bollocks. You don't want that. That is only saying X, Y, and Z and not explaining ABC. So it means this in this case, nothing. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. Thank you for the information. That's what I can do. That's what I use the internet for, right? To build relationships. So I have these people in my Rolodex so I can ask them questions about things that I don't know. That's one of the most important things I learned as being a young adult is learning when to say, I don't know. And going and trying to find someone who knows better than me. And that's not a weakness. It's a literal superpower. If you can find people to give you information that you can't currently find on your own, it's like a fucking cheat code. It's the best. I absolutely love it. And I use my cheat code. I use my superpower to disseminate information that isn't readily accessible for me. Because when you start getting into fucking virology and immunologists and all that, I don't fucking know what that is. I'm a space nerd. If you want to talk about some asteroids or like some apogee or perigee about some orbits, like how sensors work, yeah, I could probably figure that shit out, but I can't do the rest of this shit. So yeah, I know my lane and I stay in it, and I find the smart people to help explain to me what I'm getting wrong or what make it make sense.
So I'm going to give you a real world example as we close this out. Another one, and it just popped in my head.
Another
so
one.
I'm paraphrasing this.
Another one.
There was research from, I believe it was Italy. Might have been from elsewhere, that came out about 3, 4, or 5 months ago that said that the COVID vaccine had traces of graphene in it. So you're going to hear this all the time from right wingers: graphene and aluminum.
Graphene or graphite?
Graphene.
Okay.
Which is basically microscopic graphite. So you have graphene, and then aluminum is a different one that they'll say is in it. Which, by the way, the COVID vaccines contain no aluminum. Only like the TB shot.
You know what does have aluminum in it that everyone uses every day?
Not your pop can, because there's no aluminum in those, I don't believe.
Deodorant.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. There's no tin.
Yeah,
they call them tin can. Yeah, they call them tin cans. Never mind. Go ahead, Mikey.
Yeah, deodorant. Deodorant is made from aluminum salts.
And then a lot of times you'll see on certain highfalutin deodorants, it'll be a big thing. No aluminum.
Yeah.
We made this with no aluminum.
But a lot of vaccines do have aluminum, and like an oxide of aluminum, like 0.002, milliliters per, and you have to have it as I believe it's pronounced as an adjuvant, or like as a carrier for the vaccine. So some do, but anyway, with the graphene, which is also used in a similar way.
Well, the whole reason I bring it up is people will say, "Oh, there's aluminum inside." It's like you put on fucking degree every morning. That's 10 times the amount of aluminum, and it's going right into your open, sweaty ass fucking pores. What are you talking about? That's going right in your fucking bloodstream.
Well, and your wife spraying the hairspray on, and that's all that aerosols in the air, and that's the same thing. But the graphene one, so the research paper came out. It said we found traces of aluminum in this sample, and then so this went all over the internet, because graphene obviously can have some negative health effects in large doses, which this wasn't. Mm-hmm. But here is the rub. The study itself said, I received 2 vials of an unknown substance that was claimed by the person who sent it to me to be the COVID vaccine. I have no evidence that it's actually a COVID vaccine, but I tested it, and it does contain graphene. So if I told you, I'm paraphrased this long research paper. So if I give you that, Haas, what are you going to do with it as a sensible human?
Hey man, how you know this is even a vaccine? What's the verification?
Yeah, you're going to question it. But these guys, they share it and they say COVID vaccine has graphene. And now you cannot talk a Trump supporter out of the fact that there's graphene in the vaccine.
Oh,
you can't talk them out of it.
Oh, yes, I can.
Because they'll cite that study. And they'll be like, oh, no, it's lunacy.
But I'm not giving these motherfuckers nothing no more. If you want to better yourself as a person, you have to start actually looking at things like an adult and not like a teenager with a damn share button. Research things. Actually ask people. Just go on fucking Google and look for like streaming, like doctors who stream, right? Or nurses who stream. They'll have live chats just like this, and you can ask them questions. And they're not going to be a dick about it. I will be, because I don't care. That's I ain't getting paid for a stream like that. So
you'll find it,
let it loose.
You'll find it hilarious. There was a girl in a Twitter space the other day who said she doesn't like being called an anti-vaxxer. She'd rather be called a critical thinker, because that's what she is.
And here's a quick litmus test for everybody who's listening. The way you can tell whether or not you're critical thinking or not is you have to ask yourself, what is the evidence necessary to make you change your mind? If the answer is nothing, you are no longer critical thinking.